Welcome. It is no accident that you have found your way to the Release the Genie podcast. What would you do with 3 wishes? And what if you discovered that you are in fact that very genie that could grant them? Well, join us now as we discover who our next genie is as we listen in and learn the stories of triumph, inspiration, and passion with some very special guests. And now, without further delay, your host of the Release the Genie podcast, Mr. Paul Rogers.
That's so much better. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're tuning in from. I am your host, Paul Rogers, and welcome to another episode of Release the Genie. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have an amazing guest today, the wonderful Dr. Ed Womack. And my goodness me, he lives up to that billing. First of all, let's just get to the chase. This quote, listen to what it is. To whom much is given, much is required. That is the mainstay of this wonderful guy. He is a life leader specialist. He is now putting on a summit, which is back from broken, and you see it behind him. Fantastic new thing, which is just blowing up. Speaking of blowing up, Clubhouse, he is nailing it with a vengeance. So get yourself over to the room. He has the founder of Tips, which is training important people to soar. Author, motivator, and life transformer. It kind of speaks for itself. Good afternoon and welcome, Dr. Ed Womack.
Thank you so much, Paul, and the Release the Genie audience. Thank you so much. I am so excited. I've been working all day thinking, okay, are we done yet? I got to go kick it with Paul in the Releasing the Genie room. And so I'm just super duper stoked and excited about what's going to unfold, because you intentionally kind of kept a few things under wrap, and that actually intrigued me. So I'm so super excited to see what's going to be unveiled during this Releasing the Genie session, man.
When you come out of the bottle, my friend, who knows where you're going to go? So,
exactly.
If we're in for a ride, us too, you just imagine everyone else is going to be buckling up too. So let's get into it. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I've set the back scene, but tell us a little bit more about your good self.
You know, you gave the flowery picture version of it. And so in order to properly qualify that, I actually should be the person that's kind of speaking on behalf of, in front of, aside of, back from broken. You know, there were times throughout my journey where things weren't so beautiful, you know, and very early on, there were some experiences with childhood sexual abuse that caused a number of emotional dysfunctions, baggage that was carried into my adolescence, my adulthood, alongside of some of the accolades and accomplishments that were taking place simultaneously. And so as it may have been viewed from the outside, while I was winning state championships undefeated, while I was getting 3.5 grade point averages all through high school, while I was accelerating into the business arena and working for some of the largest software companies on the planet, traveling the globe at their expense, but yet having an absolute hole in my soul and not really knowing if I could turn to my left or I could turn to my right. You know how us guys do. We really don't want to bear anything less than the best to anyone else. And I have vowed to myself that the things that had happened in my childhood, I was going to take to my grave for a number of reasons. One, I was a part of a family where what happens in this house stays in the house. The most ridiculous crap ever. And then because the environment had placed my family on a pedestal. My dad was a good police officer. Let me emphasize, a good police officer. And my mom was a nurse. And so, you know, I didn't want to embarrass the family with what was going on. And so despite that, I began a journey of running away from reality, running away from the undealt with emotions, running away from those things that I didn't know or want to face head on. And so as a result of that, along this journey, I found myself totally destroying a wonderful marriage, subjecting my kids to things that they probably should have never seen or heard, as well as even for myself, putting myself in some places that I stayed longer than I wanted to stay, paid more than I wanted to pay, and definitely would never, ever, ever want to return back to those things. So by the grace of God, there was a pivotal point where I was able to actually stop long enough and have a moment of clarity to actually ask for the help that I needed. And by the grace of God, this program called Trinity House Big Bethel was there to provide that opportunity. It was a 2-year residential program with which I totally immersed myself into, because I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, that I said, you know what, let's turn this thing around. And lo and behold, I actually met Ed, the real Ed, for the first time about 17 years ago, when I decided to stop using drugs. And as the literature says, that an addict, any addict, can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And so I embraced that thing like one of the most precious gifts anyone could ever have been given. And from that point, I actually evolved into being after I graduated, a couple of years afterwards, I was asked to sit on the board as the program chair of that very same program. And just as the old adage says, from there, the rest is history, man. So now I'm just full time in a servant leadership mode, trying to help alleviate others from carrying that baggage too long, or carrying it at all, if possible. And also being able to provide them with the education, the insight, the support, the love, and the encouragement that they can find a roadmap that will lead them to reentry, recovery, and redemption if they're willing to come back from broken, man. So that's just a little bitty piece of who I am, where I've been, man.
I could just sit and listen to that for hours. That's just wonderful. So, I mean, it takes, and I know you, when you said you met the real Ed, that's so powerful. And there's a lot of people who never actually meet their real, whoever they're meant to be.
And it was such an awakening. And I sometimes even refer to it as the 800-pound gorilla's foot was removed from my neck, because having the conditional pressures of growing up in a family that was already held at a very high regard, and also being tasked with performing at a level of excellence, which there was no option to that. So if you can imagine, growing up on the west side of Detroit, I was a bookworm, proud pocket protecting nerd that got great grades. Well, that didn't exactly go over very well on the west side of Detroit, where there were a bunch of pimps, players, hustlers, ballers, and shot callers. And so, as you can imagine, I just didn't feel as though I fit in. And it really plagued me for quite a while, until I discovered the real Ed. And when I discovered the real Ed, now here's the amazing thing, Paul. When I discovered the real Ed, I began to unpack and peel back the layers of the onions and realize, well, first of all, you were never designed to fit in, you silly rabbit. Your creator designed you to be a leader. And oh, by the way, I allowed you to survive crack cocaine addiction and all that other madness, because I got something for you to do, fella.
To be honest, I do believe that the biggest and best tasks are actually saved for the people who actually are the strongest. So by what you say there, you've got a lot of work to do, and you are really into it and doing it. And I love it. This Back from Broken is a real, as far as I can see, a real pivot moment as well. So
absolutely.
Congrats on that. Well, look, this is going to be cool. I wonder if you could give us one of your release the Genie aha moments.
So one of the release the Genie aha moments was the fact that I actually had the courage to ask for help. And up until that point, I felt as though I was living on an island, and realized that, contrary to the societal stigmas of, oh, well, men should just man up and take it and deal with it, figure it out, get to the other side however you need to, by any means necessary. And what I realized was that I had been running from stuff for so long, and suppressing that I literally had like totally sent my emotions into a dormant state. And once I was actually beyond the hurdle of, okay, do I ask for help or do I not? Because, I had the little warrant entities on each shoulder saying, well, sure, you need to ask for some stinking help. You're busted, you're broke, you're disgusting. And then I had the other one that said, well, maybe this might be the right thing to do. And so that conversation went on. And I'm like, what to do? And so fortunately, I did choose to actually listen to if you go get some help, this might actually be a good thing for you. And so that was like the biggest aha moment, because people didn't judge me. People didn't look at me crazy. We were all kind of in the same boat. And the beauty of it was, once I started actually participating in Narcotics Anonymous, I realized my little journey kind of paled in comparison to some of the other things that I was hearing. I mean, it totally put it into perspective. And the beauty of that fellowship was that there was no judgment. There were some moments. I mean, you have your 10% no matter what organization or thing that you're associated with. But the greater good of that fellowship was that it allowed me an opportunity to see some other alternatives. It allowed me to begin to perceive things a lot differently, coupled with the 9.5 months of therapy that I went through back then. And I've certainly gone since then, but that was probably the most pivotal aha moment, was the fact that you can ask for help and it's okay, and nobody will judge you. In fact, there were some people like, wow, that was so courageous, that was such a strong move. And so once I came out of that intoxicated haze and began to think like a rational person, it was like, yeah, that wasn't a bad idea at all. So that was probably my Genie aha number one there, Paul.
Well, I'm delighted that you listened to the good entity, because it's. I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, which is a big thing. So I've always, and I've known you for only just a little while, but your passion and energy for helping others is absolutely amazing. And I love what you said about that no man is an island, because it can make you feel very much like a castaway.
Yeah, when you're out there, and especially if you happen to have an addiction, and it doesn't just have to be drug addiction, it could be food addiction, it could be gambling addiction, it could be all kinds of things. So addiction itself is a very debilitating condition and disease, even, that can render you into a place of just the inability to think rationally, to respond with any type of true compassion. You just want to kind of feed whatever that respected drug of choice is. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be drugs or alcohol. It could be food, it could be women, it could be gambling, it could be a number of different things. And the big premise is that if it renders your life unmanageable, I mean, there's some folk out here that do all of those other things, but they still can maintain and keep things moving. But, when you get to that place where you're just like out of control and don't even know that you're out of control, it's pretty difficult to control.
You're right. I mean, control is a very relative thing anyway. So I totally hear you on that. Well, I'm going to be really interested, having given one of your mainstay quotes earlier. Have you got a quote or a mantra which you could share with us?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite quotes of late, I'm always reading, always looking to enhance the thought process, and also how can I be better of a servant leader to those that I've been blessed to serve and work with. And one of my favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou, and it's, some people may forget what you say. They may even forget what you do, but they will never forget how you make them feel. And the reason that that's so significant and important to me, as I follow the teachings of the amazing Les Brown, said, never make a point and don't tell a story. So the reason that that's so significant to me is that when I can see that the light has come on for someone, that lets me know that they're feeling what it is that we've exchanged. And I intentionally use the word exchange, because a lot of times especially those of us that may be in an instructor capacity or if someone places us on a pedal of leadership, we lose sight of the fact that there should be a bidirectional interaction that takes place. And so that feeling is something, while some people may not be receptive to it immediately or even know that they're capable of having that feeling. And when you can see that you've broken through the barriers of distrust, the barriers of less than, the barriers of limiting belief, and get them to actually smile and take off a mask that they've been wearing for years, that feeling both ways is absolutely amazing when you're conscious of it. And along the way, there are certain things, like even if we reflect upon when we were young tykes and our moms or our dads, they might say something to us and it's kind of like, whatever. but later on in life, some of those things will come back to consciousness and you'll be like, wow, okay, so maybe mom and dad weren't such idiots. Maybe they actually knew what they were talking about. And I always used to say that I'd never say some of my parents' favorite sayings to my own kids. And one in particular was one of my dad's favorite was as a police officer. He was a pretty strict disciplinarian. And he says, I'll tell you what, if you don't like the rules here, you can leave. And so when I turned 18, I did and joined the Marine Corps because he said it one too many times. Like, really? Okay, got you. I am your child. I am driven. And so I ran off to the Marine Corps. And at that time, he didn't know about what was going on or what I had been suppressing, all my life. And it was like, dude, not only do I not like the rules, I don't like the traumatic things that I've been exposed to unbeknownst to you. I mean, my dad was a phenomenal provider and an amazing academician, highly decorated, again, a very good cop in the city of Detroit for over 25 years and highly decorated, worked for the chief of police and all kinds of stuff. And then eventually after he retired, became a chief of police because he couldn't just sit still. He still wanted to go back and serve. So he went to a little small town outside of Metro Detroit and was a chief of police there. But the point being, he wasn't aware of how significant that word or those words were to me. I felt like, man, I'm never going to say that to my kids. But I ended up actually saying it to my kids. And one of my daughters did it to me 3 days after she turned 18. She's like, Holla, I don't have to stay here anymore. I was like, I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, can she do that? She's like, yeah, she's grown now. She's officially grown. There's nothing you can do about it. And I was like, wow, that hurt, man. Like, I mean, it was like, and it was right after, it was a couple of years after their mom passed, God rest her soul. And so I had like disrupted and their mom and I had been divorced, but we were really great co-parents. And so before she passed, we had a great relationship. And I was like, when she passed, I didn't want to disrupt their lives. So I decided to move in with them, which was, in retrospect, was not the greatest idea. They did not appreciate that whatsoever, anywhere near as much as I thought they should. And there was a little turbulence, but by the grace of God, we got through it and we're all still here. But it was not pretty, man.
It's quite interesting because you're right. I have a 5-year-old, and there's so many sayings I now say. I went, damn, and it's quite funny. But I think everything is every person, every situation is a teacher, and so I hear you and how much you've learned and be able to take on. It's really, really fascinating and. Oh man, we could go on for that for a long while, but let's focus on, has there been, and as I know you've had a very sort of rocky start, has there been any particular setback or failure which you've had to overcome?
Recently or during that journey of active addiction?
You can choose whichever one comes to mind.
All right, so there have been a couple. So let me ponder that and decide which one do I want to share with the Genie audience.
Hey, remember, it's the first date, so don't get too hot and heavy.
Exactly. That's exactly why I'm trying to contemplate which piece of that or which one of those, because there've actually been a couple. There have been numerous obstacles to overcome in this journey of recovery, even after I decided that I was going to stop using drugs and alcohol and the limiting beliefs that were holding me back. I think probably the biggest obstacle post deciding to stop using drugs was realizing that I still had issues that had not been dealt with. And there were times where I had purposely cordoned off some of the things of the past on purpose. And some of those were relative to my daughters. And one of the most difficult things that I had to do, which has probably been the most valuable thing that I did, was literally write a hurt letter to my daughters to express to them that I understand how I hurt you. No, I understand, first of all, that I hurt you. The U is I realize and understand how I hurt you. The R is the remorse that I feel as a result of having hurt you. And the T is the time necessary in order for us to heal if you are willing. And that was probably one of the most difficult things that I had to do, because as a man, as a proud man, not overbearingly proud, but as a man that believes in serving others, doing the right thing as much as possible, it was very difficult to be out in the world helping all these other people. But at home, there were things that were not right. And so I literally, a couple of years ago, made the decision that I wanted to make sure that my private life aligned with my public life, and so that I could sleep well at night. And if others were to try and peek behind the covers, they'd be okay too. but by far, that was probably the most difficult, bar any of the other things, because I had to admit in writing at length, because it wasn't quite as terse as I just explained the acronym. And it took a lot of thought. It took me back to some places that I didn't particularly want to go, but I needed to go. And I also had to write it with a different lens and a different desire to listen, that typically as men, we don't take the time from an emotional intelligence perspective to try and even get there. And during writing that letter, Paul, I have to say, I realized the biggest thing that a lot of kids want that they don't get, contrary to the material provisions, because my babies had more than enough stuff. In fact, they had stuff I can recall vividly on numerous occasions they never even opened or touched. So the material aspect of things, I get A+ on that one. However, on the emotional spectrum, Paul, I was an emotional retard. I was totally retarded in that arena. And it was really difficult for me to be able to let go of what my standards were, what I believed was to be true, what I felt was enough time or enough feedback to have addressed a particular issue as a man. But I got daughters, man. And daughters process things totally different than we do. And while I kind of sort of understood that theoretically, I had not internalized it and put it into practice in my own family with my girls. It was about, well, I'm making sure you got everything you need and a bunch of what you want. So what's the problem? Yeah. Which is something that a lot of guys carry. And unfortunately, we don't realize that the most important thing that any kid wants is time.
That took an absolutely amazing amount of courage, because to be able to actually be that authentic and genuine, for it actually be received in that light, because writing is one thing, being received, you had to admit you were wrong on things, which is not an easy thing to do. And I think the fact that there's so many people live a double life. And that's fine. But at one point that one life will seep into the other. So I think that's very inspiring. Anyone listening to actually not just dedicate their time of being the great person in public, but also take that greatness home with you. And you're right, guys, we kind of think we'll fix it. Yeah, that's fixed. Not the case.
Not the case. And actually it's the other way around. It should start at the home, and then you take what you're doing and practicing in the home to the public. And one of the things that was so intriguing about that particular juncture in the journey is that it really made me focus on what part I played in it. And I oftentimes tell people that I'm afforded the opportunity to work with, it's like, I will never ask you to do something that I either have not done or am not willing to do. And I've always meant that, but I didn't realize what I had kind of overlooked or had not actually addressed in my own camp. And so one of the things that I pride myself on is integrity, because I tell people, it's like, you know what, I ain't got much, but my integrity is the most important thing that I have. And so being able to stand on that flat-footed and know that I know that I know when nobody's looking, I'm still okay, is really important to me, because a lot of times, like you said, there's the duality of existence that some of us live in, and it's exhausting. It can be very damaging if you happen to meet people and they get to meet the imposter, and then eventually the real
Ed,
the real demon shows up. It's like, oh, what just happened? And so, it's an ongoing journey, and I am yet prayerful, far more so, as I try to continue to understand what part did I play in it and what it was I supposed to learn in the process. And so I'm a big student, academic guy, but I'm also now learning to kind of balance that out with some emotional intelligence and the ability to be compassionate of where people are. I was talking to actually one of our featured speakers, Bishop Carnes, the other day, and we were talking about the difference between functioning in your anointing and functioning according to your emotions. And in case you got note takers out there, I'm going to say that again. There's a difference between functioning in your anointing versus functioning in your emotions. The difference, real quick, is when you function in your emotions, which is the common state that most of us function in. If somebody is in your presence that you don't particularly care for, you're going to alter the way that you may deliver. You're going to alter the way you're going to interact. You may even alter the content that you give to them. That's functioning in your emotions. When you function in your anointing, you're literally a representative of the Creator on high, and whoever that might be for you, but I call him God. And so when you function according to your anointing, it doesn't matter how people show up. It doesn't even matter how they respond or if they respond. You are to perform at a level of excellence regardless. And so it was a vast difference betwixt the two that I honestly didn't really internalize until just last week in talking to Bishop Carnes. And so I'm so grateful to have that king in my circle of excellence now. And it really it changes the dynamic, because I always love to give energy. I love to make sure that people are having a pleasant experience, but to really get to a place where it's like, okay, put the emotional totally out of the equation and function according to the gifting, that you've gotten from on high. That totally adds a whole dimension of interaction, a whole different dimension of likability and humility that is required in order to function in that capacity. So yeah, I'm not sure where we were going with that one.
Well, to be honest, you see the number of things there. I mean, first of all, you're always open to learning. Most people shut themselves off and say, oh, I'm done with that. But learning is a constant thing. The other part, which I was thinking was, ego versus a calling. Because ego, according to Dr. Wayne Dyer, is either edging God out or earth guide only. So,
I like that one. I like that one.
So, that's kind of just touching on the physical plane. But so, there's a lot of substance in what you just said there. So, love it. Well, look, okay, for a bit of fun now. Who's your hero? It can be alive, dead, fiction, non-fiction. So shoot, who's your hero?
That's a simple one. Who do you think my hero is? No, I'm kidding.
I know.
Don't answer a question with a question. So my hero is Batman. Batman. That's my hero, man.
Well, there's no coincidence that that Batman and you have never appeared in the same room. Just brilliant. We're on to you, Mr. Wayne. So, I mean, tell us what you're up to now, because I know you've got so many things on your plate, and you're giving out so much. So, give us a little clue of what you're up to.
Man, so obviously the clubhouse room, the coming back from setback room, which birthed the the back from broken summit, but also simultaneously the second edition of the Back from Broken book. And it's the second edition because the original version was written in 2014, at which time I didn't even think it was supposed to be a book. It literally started as my fourth step in Narcotics Anonymous. And so, of course, there have been a few additional chapters that have played out since 2014, a little additional wisdom that good old Ed has derived now that we know the real Ed. And so writing the book, I also was procrastinating on launching the Back from Broken podcast. And in the midst of that procrastination, this opportunity was presented to me to actually submit for a TV show. So the Back from Broken TV show actually did launch 2 weeks ago, but I didn't want to dilute the focus and the energy on the summit. And so it's a 6-month contract, which is a unheard of blessing that I was granted, almost like a genie wish. But because if I could have asked for it, I probably would have, because it literally was on my vision board from 2017 when I created We Rise Media to do radio, television, and publishing. And so the television thing literally just happened this year. And so Back from Broken TV is now up and live on the Preach the Word network every Wednesday at every Wednesday at 12 a.m. or 12 p.m., the afternoon. And then really right now, the real energy, man, is in getting the speakers ready to show up in excellence for the Back from Broken Summit, and trying to get some behinds and seats that will be there for them, because I just believe with the global and diverse nature of the speakers that we've got, including yours truly. And I reviewed your keynote the other day, and I was just like, yeah, he nailed it. But I had no doubt from the time we interviewed, I had no doubt whatsoever that you would just be absolutely amazing. And the couple of times that you've come into the clubhouse room, and I was just like, yeah, this is so much bigger than the Release the Genie show or the Back from Broken Summit. There's a whole lot of yet to come with regard to us, bro. And I'm so looking forward to it. But yeah, those are kind of the things that I'm focusing on right now, and trying to really align myself vertically more so than anything else, and to make sure that I'm in tune with what it is that he allowed me to still be here for, as opposed to being motivated by my own selfish motives, the ego that you referred to. And at one point in time on the journey, I did ease God out. And that was a huge, huge, huge mistake, having been brought up in the church. I'm not religious, but I am extremely spiritual. And so I definitely believe that there is yet stuff for us to do. Not sure what it is, and I'm cool with that. Because when I get me out of the way, amazing things tend to happen, Paul.
Well, also, I think you gravitate and you attract some amazing people. I've been in the clubhouse and I've listened to the stories, and they're just astonishingly amazing. So to be able to actually show that and just bring that raw energy to the stage. I mean, to be honest, if you haven't looked into the summit at the moment, you really need to be there, because it's like having a real pivot time in your own life by just listening to all these wonderful people. So I love it, man. I love it.
I appreciate you, man, so much. I love it as well. And, just one quick note with regard to the experience that people can look forward to at the summit. Like you said, we've got just a wide array of amazing people from all walks of life. And so you won't hear a bunch of stories about the same thing over and over again. We were very strategic in our selection of that. We were very intentional to make sure that we have people from the East Coast, from the West Coast, and even abroad. And so we are so looking forward to the experience that those participants have, as well as our featured speakers.
Awesome. And I also know, because a little birdie told me, that actually it's so popular that actually you've got another one penned for later in the year from people flooding you with requests. That's awesome.
Yeah, we had a meeting with the planning team. There's like 6 of us, and they said, Dr. Ed, are we going to turn off the speaker interviews? And I was like, toiling. I'm like, well, we got 24 hours in a day. We could just extend the hours. Was my first thought. And then I started to realize, you know what, we're really close to the midway point from when the speaker call started to when the actual summit is. So I said, as I was talking with the amazing wise Mr. Paul, he says, well, what you might want to consider, and I love the way that he positioned it. He didn't say, you need to do this. He was like, well, one thing to consider might be to actually have the interview and actually let them know, you know, we appreciate your response and your interest, but we're going to hold on. You'll be the first in the line for the next one. And that's what actually stimulated the conversation to have with the team, Paul. So thank you for that wisdom, because I was about to extend the hours, just say, you know what, we can just go around the clock. But that would not be fair to bring a new speaker on at this point, because they wouldn't have the benefit of the energy we put into the kickoff and the other trainings and the things that we've done in preparation with the featured speakers. They've already missed like 2 or 3 weeks. And so it really would not have been fair to them. And we would have had a much more difficult time to ensure that they would have the excellent experience that we want to make sure all of our featured speakers, as well as the participants, have.
No, that's, and you know, playing catch up is always difficult. And I must say that was a cracking English accent. I love so
I do try, my dear.
Oh no, you can
add
that one to your resume. That's, you know, now can play English actors. I love it. So, so now I'm going to move to my 3 wishes, which I've kind of feel like I've already had so much value, but I'm going to persevere. So, are you ready, Genie?
I am ready.
There we go. So my first wish is, what is the best advice you've received in your life?
The best advice that I received in my life was that other people's opinion are not your business. And the reason I picked that one is because for a long time on my journey, I was so caught up on what other people might say, think, or do, that it actually almost led to a suicide. So I did attempt suicide at one point in my journey, mainly because I was caught up on worrying about what everybody else might have to say. So that was probably the most important.
That's amazing. There's so many people held a hostage of that as well. No, phenomenal advice, and anyone listening, yeah, that is just fantastic advice.
You know what, Paul, I'm going to take you on the road with me, man. You know, you teed me up with that hostage. I can't resist, and I'll be brief. But oftentimes we hear the adage that the truth can set you free. But the unfortunate reality is that cannot occur until you know the lies that have been holding you hostage. Oh, that's good. That's good, huh? Yeah. Huh? You teed it up. It up.
Yeah, I've got a chill down the back of my spine here, so that was a good one. This is a hell of a game of tennis here we're having. So I'm going to move on to my second wish, having already banked a really solid first. So my second wish is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
So the advice that I would give to my younger self would be, you are uniquely and wonderfully made, so act like it. Don't allow what other people expect of you, what you see around you, to impact what you know that you know that you know you have been put on this planet to do. Beautiful,
because that is the clearest definition I've heard of a calling. So really, really strong stuff, my friend. That's wonderful. I'm almost ashamed to ask for my third wish, but I'm not that ashamed. So my third and final wish is, could you share one of your personal habits which attribute to your success?
Absolutely. So one of my personal habits is, see, now you're gonna put my masculinity on the line, ain't you? So one of my personal habits that I think makes me so grounded and so in tune with where I'm at right now, and that's helping me to propel, is literally my quiet time with the birds every single morning. Every single morning, I go out on the patio, unless it's raining, and then I'll go on the front porch with the birds. But it's not as cool as when I'm able to sit on the patio, because my patio opens up to like the sky. And there's like multiple pine trees, and there's a vast variety of birds. And so about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, they're chirping and singing. And I've even got to the point now that I say, well, they're just having a conversation with Ed, because we're buddies. We've been doing this for quite a while. But that allows me to get grounded. It allows me to remain humble and take in the wonders of just how this universe was created. And there's a passage in the Bible that says, if God took care of the sparrows, what makes you think he won't take care of you? And it really gave me a truer sense of appreciation for all of his creation. But the birds in particular, just really, as they're singing, as they're chirping. And now that I know, because I actually started doing some study, and I'm like, well, why are these birds making all these crazy noises? And depending on what time of the season it is, some of the things that they say or the chirp sounds that they make vary. Like during mating season, there's some different things that you might hear that you otherwise might not. And I don't know exactly what they are, but I know that there's distinct different things that take place. And that just really gives me the opportunity to kind of just and settle myself, ground myself. And I intentionally put bookends on my day and my evening. So that's how I start my day. And then the end of my day, I block out the 15, 20 minutes before I lay down intentionally to just get into a quiet space. I don't call anyone. I don't talk to anybody. I don't check messages. I just kind of, similar to the morning routine, but there's no birds in that one. But I just kind of settle myself. And what happens, and that was something that was recommended by my therapist, is when you're in a relaxed state, it allows you to perform better. It also allows you to sleep better. And if you don't have a whole bunch of tension and whatnot going through your body before you lay down, you're less likely to have nightmares. And a lot of people don't realize how significant that is. And so now I've removed all the mind and mood altering substances from my existence. I start my day in a tranquil meditative space, and I end my day in a tranquil meditative space. That makes for an awesome experience, bro.
I love the bookends, and recognizing the unique and also abundance at the same time. It's a duality, but it's actually really and well known. And I love the bit about clearing your mind, because effectively you're just about to go and marinate for that 7 or 8 hours and whatever you last were thinking about. So yeah, no, I love it. I love it. Great tips. So look, we're nearly at the end, which is really sad.
Exactly.
We're coming to the final bits, but I'm not going to let you go. Being that you're a bookworm, if you can't actually first tell me what would be one of your books that you would recommend.
One of the books that I would recommend is Crushed by Bishop T.D. Jakes. And the reason I would mention that one as it relates to the overall movement of Back from Broken, it was very interesting. During one of the stages in the journey, I was actually incarcerated. And at the county jail that I was incarcerated in, we had to dress out in that fluorescent orange. And the reason that Crushed is so significant is I've pretty much read everything that Bishop T.D. Jakes has actually published. But on the cover of Crushed, he's wearing a fluorescent orange blazer, which my mom sent to me while I was incarcerated. And I'm like, what in the Sam Hill is going on here? So then I actually read it, and it was so stinking applicable. It was like he was following me around thinking about, okay, what does Ed need to hear? What does Ed need to really understand? What is going to pour into Ed's overall ability to carry forward despite the past? Crushed is that book. because it's literally about the process of wine pressing. And so as a grape, as you're attempting to make wine, you have to gather the grapes. Then you got to crush the grapes, but you can only get out of the grapes what's already in the grapes. And so as the grapes go through that process of being crushed, in order to make the wine, there has to be some fermentation. Well, that fermentation are all the undesirable, horrible, bad tasting experiences that we had to go through in our lives until ultimately we become that fine wine, that connoisseurs will.
Drinking with the little pinky.
With the little pinky. So by far, man, Crushed was my absolute most favorite book.
That's a beautiful story, and I love the imagery, man. That's really good because it plays on so many different levels.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, and certainly for me, giving me a whole new direction on reading. So thank you very much for that.
Oh man, it's a plum pleasing pleasure, as Les Brown would oftentimes say. But of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't leave you with this.
Here we go.
Good, better, best. We can't let it rest until our good is our better and our better is our best. And for everybody in the Releasing the Genie environment, if you latch a hold to this consistent amazingness by my brother Paul Rogers every single episode, boy, stop. We might just see you at the top because the bottom's entirely too crowded. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. I love you. And I can't wait to see what's coming next for us, man.
Do you know what? There's so much bromance going on here. It's suddenly got very hot in here. So, finally, where can we find you, my friend? Where do you hang out?
Mainly, I hang out in Clubhouse and on LinkedIn. And so on LinkedIn, you can find me at Ed Womack Speaks. And on Clubhouse, you can find me at Ed Womack. And of course, if you want to see us virtually live, simply pop on over to backfrombrokensummit.com. Reserve your seat today. Don't delay. It will provide to you a roadmap of redemption, recovery, and restoration that is guaranteed to yield results for the higher version of you.
Holy schmoly, I'm sold. Oops, I'm in it. So
yeah, your seat's already taken care of, man.
God damn. So look, thank you very much. An absolutely inspiring, motivating interview. And also I had a huge amount of fun as well.
Exactly.
As much fun as I can have with my clothes on. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Ed, for making some time for us and the Genie lovers. And hey guys, you know where to find Ed. If you've liked and been inspired by Ed, please go and find him. A true modern day legend. And you know, this is just the journey. So make sure you become part of it. Thank you once again, Ed. And Genie lovers, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap. You have been listening to yet another episode of the Release the Genie podcast with host Paul Rogers. Be sure to follow Paul on the LinkedIn platform and learn more of Paul's resources at www.takeactionacademy.ca. And until next time, as always, be mindful and be sure to release your Genie. Thanks for listening.